The church was so quiet I could hear the air conditioner humming behind the stained glass windows. 300 guests sat frozen in their seats. At the front, Lily Bennett stood alone in a white dress she had spent 8 months planning around. Her groom wasn't coming. I knew it before anyone else did. I'd seen the text on her phone 10 minutes earlier. I can't do this. Lily kept staring at the doors anyway, like if she waited long enough, reality might change its mind. Then someone in the second row whispered, "Poor girl." The look on Lily's face hit me harder than the message ever could. Before I had time to think, I stood up. Every head in the room turned toward me, and somehow the words I'd buried for years came out. I'll marry her. My name is Ethan Parker, and for 11 years, Lily Bennett had been the most important person in my life. Not my girlfriend. Not my wife. Just Lily. The funny thing about being in love with your best friend is that eventually the feeling stops being dramatic. It settles into ordinary things, knowing how she takes her coffee, remembering which movie always makes her cry, keeping track of the stories she tells more than once because she's tired, or showing up on the morning of her wedding with a blueberry muffin because she'd been stress-eating them before every major event since she was 21. That morning had started exactly like that. Charleston was already warm before 9 o'clock. The air smelled faintly of salt from the harbor as I parked outside the old waterfront church. I walked into the bridal suite carrying a paper bag from our favorite cafe. Lily was sitting in front of a mirror surrounded by makeup brushes, curling irons, and half-finished glasses of champagne. "You look terrifyingly bridal," I told her. She rolled her eyes. "You say that like it's a medical condition." "I'm pretty sure it is." That earned me a laugh. For a moment, everything felt normal. Then I handed her the muffin. She stared at it longer than usual. Still remembering my emergency muffin protocol, she asked quietly, "Someone has to..." Normally, she would have taken a huge bite immediately. Instead, she set it beside her bouquet, untouched. That should have been my first warning. The second came 20 minutes later. I found her standing alone in a hallway near the back of the church, staring at her phone. Her face had gone completely pale. "Lily." She looked up too quickly. Nothing. It was the worst lie she'd ever told. Before she could lock the screen, I saw the message. 3 short words. "I can't do this." For a second, I couldn't process them. Then I understood exactly who had sent them. Ryan. The man she was supposed to marry in less than an hour. My stomach dropped. "Lily." She shook her head immediately. "Don't." Her voice cracked. "Please don't say anything yet." I wanted to find Ryan. I wanted to drag him back. I wanted to punch him. Instead, I stood there while my best friend tried desperately not to fall apart. And somehow that felt worse. A few minutes later, the wedding coordinator appeared at the doorway. "It's time." Lily looked toward the sanctuary, toward 300 guests waiting for a ceremony that wasn't going to happen. Then she whispered something so quietly I almost missed it. "What if he never comes?" And for the first time all morning, I had no idea how to answer. The wedding never started. At first, people waited politely. 5 minutes. Then 10. Then 20. The string quartet stopped playing and quietly disappeared from the front of the church. Guests began checking their phones. A few stood up and whispered to each other near the back doors. Ryan wasn't stuck in traffic. He wasn't running late. He was gone. I found Lily in a small side room normally used by the bridal party. The door was half closed. She was sitting on a folding chair, still wearing her wedding dress. The untouched blueberry muffin sat beside her bouquet. For the first time in 11 years, I didn't know what to say to her. "I'm sorry," I finally said. She laughed once. It wasn't a happy sound. "That's what everyone keeps saying." I leaned against the wall. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Outside, I could hear muffled conversations spreading through the church. The news was moving fast. Lily stared at the floor. "I plan weddings for a living, Ethan." "I know. I literally help people avoid disasters like this." "I know." Her eyes filled with tears. "And now I'm the disaster." "No." She looked at me. "No. No. Ryan is—" For a second, she smiled. Just a little. Then it disappeared. "What am I supposed to do?" she whispered. I didn't have an answer. A church full of people was waiting. Her mother was crying somewhere in the building. Her father was driving in from Savannah and hadn't even arrived yet. Everything she'd spent months planning had collapsed in less than an hour. Then someone knocked on the door. A bridesmaid poked her head inside. "Lily, people are asking if there's going to be an announcement." The room went silent. The bridesmaid looked uncomfortable. I couldn't blame her. Nobody knew what to do. Lily closed her eyes. And suddenly, I saw exactly what she was afraid of. Not losing Ryan. Not really. It was the humiliation. 300 people watching her become a story they'd tell later. Remember that wedding where the groom never showed? Something inside me snapped. Before I could talk myself out of it, I pushed away from the wall and headed for the sanctuary. "Ethan," Lily called. I kept walking. A minute later, I stood at the front of the church facing a room full of confused guests. Every face turned toward me. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. Then I looked back. Lily was standing in the doorway. Lost. Alone. Still waiting to be chosen. And before fear could stop me, I said the words that changed everything. "I'll marry her." The entire church went silent. Including Lily. Nobody moved. Nobody laughed. Which somehow made the situation even more terrifying. For a few seconds, all I could hear was my own heartbeat. Then Lily stared at me like I'd suddenly started speaking another language. "Ethan." I immediately realized how insane it sounded. To be fair, it was insane. "I'm not saying we should actually get married right now," I said quickly. A nervous laugh escaped somewhere in the audience. "That's not helping," Lily muttered. That got a bigger laugh. For the first time all day, the tension in the room eased slightly. I walked toward her. Slowly. Giving her every chance to tell me to shut up. She didn't. When I reached the doorway, I lowered my voice. "I just didn't want you standing here alone." Something shifted in her expression. Not happiness. Not relief. Something more complicated. Something that scared me because I wasn't sure I was imagining it. A few minutes later, her parents announced that the ceremony had been canceled. Guests began leaving. The reception venue refunded what it could. The flowers stayed. The cake stayed. The embarrassment stayed, too. By sunset, the church parking lot was almost empty. Lily and I ended up sitting on a wooden bench overlooking the harbor. Neither of us had changed clothes. She still wore her wedding dress. I still wore the suit I'd rented for the day. The whole thing felt surreal. The wind coming off the water lifted a loose strand of her hair. For a while, we just watched boats moving through the marina. Finally, Lily broke the silence. "You know everyone's going to talk about this." "Probably. They'll think you proposed I technically offered. She groaned. That is absolutely not better. I smiled despite myself. A second later, she did too. Then her eyes dropped to the paper bag sitting between us. The blueberry muffin, still untouched. She picked it up. I can't believe this thing survived the apocalypse. Emergency muffin protocol. Right. She tore off a small piece. For years, that muffin had always meant comfort. A joke. A ritual. Something safe. But sitting there beside her, watching the sunset paint gold across the harbor, it suddenly felt different. More personal, more dangerous. Lily took another bite before speaking. Summa. Why did you do it? There it was. The question I'd been avoiding all afternoon. I looked out toward the water. Because I'd loved her for years. Because watching her get abandoned felt unbearable. Because every part of me wanted to choose her. Instead, I said the safer truth. I couldn't stand seeing you blamed for something that wasn't your fault. She studied me carefully. Too carefully. Then she asked the question I'd feared for 11 years. Was that really the only reason? I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. And the silence between us suddenly meant far more than any answer. I wish I could tell you I answered her question that night. I didn't. I sat there looking at the harbor while every honest word stayed trapped somewhere behind my ribs. Lily eventually nodded. Not because I'd answered. Because I hadn't. A few minutes later, she stood up. I'm tired. Yeah. I think I'm going to go home. I'll drive you. She hesitated, then gave me a small smile. Okay. The ride back to her townhouse was quiet. Not awkward. Just careful. Like we were both carrying something fragile and pretending not to notice. Over the next 2 weeks, life slowly restarted. Or at least it looked that way from the outside. Lily canceled contracts. Returned gifts. Met with vendors. Answered dozens of uncomfortable texts. I helped whenever she asked. And sometimes when she didn't. The strange part was that we spent more time together than ever before. Coffee runs. Takeout dinners. Sunday mornings at the cafe. Long walks near the waterfront. Little pieces of normal life. The kind that started feeling dangerously close to something else. Something neither of us was naming. Then one Friday afternoon, everything shifted. I was picking up lunch when I heard 2 women talking near the counter. At first, I wasn't paying attention. Then I heard Lily's name. She's lucky Ethan stepped in. Yeah, he was just trying to save her. Poor guy. He's probably been cleaning up her messes for years. I left before I heard the rest. But apparently I wasn't the only one who had. Because that evening, Lily canceled our dinner plans. Then she ignored my text. And the next one. The following afternoon, I found her sitting alone on her porch. A half-finished coffee rested beside her. She didn't look surprised to see me, only tired. Ethan. Are you avoiding me? A humorless laugh escaped her. Maybe. I sat in the chair across from her. The silence stretched. Finally, she looked up. Tell me something honestly. Okay. When you stood up in that church, she swallowed. Were you choosing me? My chest tightened. Lily. Or were you rescuing me? There it was. The real wound. Not Ryan. Not the wedding. The fear underneath all of it. Being the person someone settled for. The person people felt sorry for. The backup plan. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. I need to know I'm not the woman you pitied. I opened my mouth. But before I could answer, she stood. I can't do this right now. Then she stepped inside the house. The screen door closed between us. And for the first time since the wedding, I wasn't sure she would let me back in. I spent 3 days trying to figure out the perfect thing to say. That was the problem. I was looking for words. Lily had asked for the truth. And the truth wasn't elegant. The truth was that I'd been choosing her for years. Quietly. Cowardly. Without ever telling her. On Monday morning, I got a call from Atlanta. A large architecture firm had been recruiting me for months. Better salary. Bigger projects. A chance to finally move beyond regional work. 3 weeks earlier, I probably would have accepted. Not because I wanted Atlanta, because it felt safe. Easier than staying somewhere every street corner reminded me of a woman I couldn't have. The recruiter gave me 48 hours to decide. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table staring at the contract. Then I thought about something Lily once said after a terrible date. If someone wants to be with you, they shouldn't make you solve a puzzle first. At the time, she'd been talking about dating, but suddenly it felt aimed directly at me. I had spent 11 years turning my feelings into a puzzle. The next morning, I declined the offer. Not for Lily. Not exactly. For myself. Because for the first time, I was tired of building my life around things I was afraid to say. I didn't tell her. I didn't call. I didn't send a dramatic text. Instead, on Sunday morning, I showed up at our cafe. The same corner table. The same view of the harbor, and one blueberry muffin. At 10 o'clock, Lily walked in. She froze when she saw me. For a moment, I thought she might leave. Instead, she slowly crossed the room. I pushed the muffin toward her. She looked at it and laughed softly. "You're really committed to this muffin thing." Apparently, neither of us sat down immediately. Finally, I took a breath. I turned down the Atlanta job. Her eyes widened. "What?" I said no. "Why?" "Because I love you." The words nearly came out. Instead, I forced myself not to hide behind half-truths anymore. Because I was running. She stared at me. I spent years pretending friendship was enough because I was scared of losing you. My voice shook slightly. I wasn't rescuing you in that church, Lily. I swallowed. I was choosing you. The cafe suddenly felt very quiet. I don't know if that's what you want, I continued, and I'm not asking you to decide right now, but I need you to know that none of this was pity. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then she reached across the table and took my hand, not because she needed saving, not because she was lonely, because she was making a choice too. The strange thing was, after all the drama, nothing magical happened. There wasn't a dramatic kiss in the middle of the cafe. Nobody applauded. No romantic movie soundtrack started playing. Lily held my hand for a few seconds, then let go and sat down. And somehow, that felt more important than any grand gesture. Because for the first time, neither of us was running. A week later, I picked her up for what we both awkwardly agreed was our first real date. "Feels weird calling it that," she admitted as she climbed into my truck. "You mean after only 11 years? She laughed. Exactly. The tension that had haunted us for weeks wasn't completely gone. But it was different now. Lighter. Honest. We spent the evening wandering through Charleston's historic district, stopping at small shops, sharing appetizers at a seafood restaurant, and arguing about whether tourists actually enjoyed horse carriage tours. The argument was ongoing. I was winning. At least that's what I told myself. By the time we reached the waterfront, the sky had turned orange and gold. For a while we stood quietly watching the boats move across the harbor. Then Lily slipped her hand into mine. Not hesitant, not uncertain, just natural. Like something that had been trying to happen for years. You know, she said, staring at the water, for a long time I thought the worst thing that happened was Ryan leaving. I looked at her, and she smiled softly. The worst thing was believing it meant something about me. A knot I hadn't realized I was carrying finally loosened. You know it didn't. I do now. The wind lifted a strand of her hair. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I reached into the paper bag I'd been carrying. Lily immediately narrowed her eyes. Oh no. What? You brought one, didn't you? I pulled out a blueberry muffin. She started laughing before I even handed it over. Of course you did. Emergency muffin protocol. That's not what this is anymore. She wasn't wrong. Not anymore. The first muffin had been friendship. The second had been comfort. This one felt like a promise. Not a proposal. Not forever written in stone. Just a promise that we would stop pretending. Lily took a bite before looking up at me. For the record. Yeah. If you ever ask me that question again. My heartbeat immediately betrayed me. She smiled. I'd like it to happen after a few more dates. I laughed. That seems fair. Then she slipped her arm through mine as we continued walking down the waterfront together. And for the first time in years, neither of us was waiting to be chosen. We already had. Looking back now, I don't think this story is about a wedding that never happened. It's about what came after. For a long time, I thought love was something you protected by staying quiet, that if I cared enough about Lily, I should be grateful just to have a place in her life. What I didn't understand was that silence can become its own kind of distance. And Lily had her own lesson to learn. Being left behind by one person didn't make her less worthy of being chosen by someone else. The hardest part wasn't Ryan leaving. It was refusing to let that moment define her value. Sometimes life closes a door in the most public, painful way possible. Sometimes the future you planned disappears in a single text message. But every once in a while, that ending creates space for a truth that has been waiting much longer. For us, it wasn't about a dramatic proposal or a perfect love story. It was about two people finally being honest. So I'm curious, have you ever realized that the person who truly cared about you had been there all along? If this story meant something to you, let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy emotional stories about love, friendship, and second chances, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for listening.